Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep into philosophy with Baruch
Oh,
Spinoza,
yeah, Spinoza.
and we've got some really interesting sources here,
Hmm.
all about
Mm-hmm.
his pretty radical ideas on free will.
Yeah, Spinoza, he was way ahead of his time. Back in the 17th century, he was already challenging the very idea of free will. I mean, like what most people just, take for granted.
Right.
And his work, look, it really makes you wonder, like, how much control we actually have over our lives.
So is he really saying that free will is just an illusion?
That's exactly it. He believed that everything we do, even our thoughts, are all determined by a chain of prior causes and natural laws.
So kind of like a chain reaction.
Exactly. Like dominoes.
Yeah,
You
right.
know,
Each domino falls because the one before it knocked it over. So in Spinoza's view, it's the same with our choices.
Okay, so I'm picturing this like I had this job offer a few years back, a completely different city.
huh.
And I remember I agonized over that decision, the pros and cons, all that.
Sure.
And at the time, I felt like I was making this big free choice to stay put. But looking back now, I can kind of see that whole chain of events that led me there, like my family being here, certain projects, even my mood that week. Makes you think.
That's a great example.
So what about God? Does he get to make free choices?
Okay, so this is where things get really wild. Even God, in Spinoza's philosophy,
Yeah.
is bound by these chains of necessity. He doesn't act on a whim,
Mm-hmm.
out of free will.
So even God's not free.
Nope. Everything operates according to this, like a grand interconnected order.
Okay, but if we're not really in control, why do we feel so strongly that we have free will?
Well, Spinoza thought this feeling comes from, well, basically ignorance.
Okay.
We're just not aware of the complex web of causes behind our decisions. We invent this idea of free will to kind of explain it, like we're looking for a ghost in the machine.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then doesn't that let people off the hook for their actions?
That's a great question. And it gets right to the heart of how Spinoza thought about ethics.
Okay.
He wants us to, redefine responsibility, not as blame or punishment, but as understanding the cause and effect that shapes our actions.
So instead of asking, was it their fault?
Mm-hmm.
We should be asking what led them to do that. Exactly. That's a pretty big shift in perspective. I bet our listeners are thinking about this already.
Yeah, and that shift has, well, I think it has huge implications for, for morality, justice, even our personal relationships.
So a lot more to unpack there, but I think we've laid some really interesting groundwork here today, just in this first part. We've kind of started to grasp Spinoza's radical view that free will is this sort of fantasy, but it seems like he's not just, trying to burst our bubble. He's offering a new way to understand freedom, and it might be even more liberating than the illusion of choice, right? We'll pick up right there in part 2. So stay tuned. Welcome back. I don't know about you, but I've been thinking about this whole free will thing since we left off last time. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is a big shift in how we usually think about things.
Totally. So we talked about how Spinoza's philosophy really impacts how he thought about ethics.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it all ties together.
So how does it actually guide our actions? I mean, if every choice is already predetermined, does anything even matter?
Well, this is where I think Spinoza gets surprisingly practical. Even though it's, really heady philosophical stuff, he just said straight up, joy is good, sadness is bad.
So wait, does that mean we should just chase pleasure all the time?
Not exactly. For Spinoza, joy isn't just about indulging, every little whim.
Right.
It's a much deeper kind of state of being. It's about understanding ourselves and the world around us.
So it's not about ignoring the bad stuff. It's more about approaching life's challenges with a certain mindset.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Got it.
And that's actually where his ideas about emotions come into play.
I was just thinking about that.
He was really fascinated by the power of emotions, but he also saw how they could, lead us in the wrong direction.
Lead us astray.
Exactly.
Okay.
He said that passions, like really strong emotions, totally natural, but they
Yeah.
can cloud our judgment. And we might end up doing things that actually just cause more suffering.
Okay, so it's not about being an emotionless robot. It's more about understanding our emotions and managing them. You got it. This makes me think of all those times I made decisions based on pure emotion, anger or fear, or even just excitement. Sometimes those choices well, I ended up regretting them.
That's exactly the kind of thing Spinoza's talking about.
So emotions are powerful, but we don't have to let them totally run the show. Right.
And here's another one of his ideas that might sound a little strange at first. He believed that repentance, like feeling sorry for our mistakes, is actually pointless.
Wait, hold on. Pointless. So there's no reason to, like, feel bad when we mess up.
Well, not quite that simple.
Yeah.
Remember, Spinoza thought that everything happens out of necessity.
Right, right.
So repentance comes from this misunderstanding of how our actions happened in the first place. Like, it's like blaming yourself for something that was, in a way, inevitable.
So instead of beating ourselves up about the past, we should focus on, like, understanding why we did what we did. Like, what actually led us to that choice.
Exactly. It's about learning and growing from those experiences, not getting stuck in guilt or regret.
Okay, that makes sense. But then where do we go from there? If we're not supposed to dwell on the past, what should we be focusing on instead?
Well, Spinoza thought it was really important to understand, like, our place in the grand scheme of things. He saw the whole universe as this vast, interconnected system. And he believed that true freedom and happiness come from recognizing our place in this whole system.
So instead of trying to control everything, which we can't, it's about understanding and accepting things as they are.
Exactly.
That's a pretty radical way to think about things.
It is. And it can be really tough, especially since, our culture is all about achieving things and being in control.
For sure. But I think I'm starting to get it. It's about focusing on what we can control, like our thoughts, our actions, how we respond to stuff.
Right. It's about finding that balance between accepting what is and, still trying to become the best versions of ourselves.
This is where I think his idea of true nature comes in, right? But what does he even mean by that?
That is the million-dollar question. And it's something we're going to explore way more in the next part. But for Spinoza, our true nature isn't just some fixed thing.
Okay.
It's something we, uncover and we cultivate through reason, through understanding.
Yeah.
Living in accordance with what he calls adequate knowledge.
Okay, now my brain is starting to hurt. This is some deep stuff.
It is.
But it's super fascinating. So we've seen how Spinoza challenges our ideas about free will, right? And then he presents this whole new way of thinking about ethics and responsibility, even our emotions.
And we're just getting started.
Yeah. In the last part of our deep dive, we'll talk about how to put these ideas into action. Like, for real. How do we cultivate that adequate knowledge he talks about?
And how do we
use reason to navigate, all the ups and downs of life. It's all connected. It sounds like we've got a lot more to cover. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with part 3 of our deep dive into Spinoza's world.
All right, welcome back. So we spent the last 2 parts, really diving into Spinoza's philosophy, all this stuff about free will, reason, ethics. But how do we actually put it all into practice? That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
It's one thing to grasp these ideas in theory, but how do we actually bridge the gap
Yeah.
between thinking about it and actually living it?
Exactly. Like, how does this help me when I'm stuck in traffic, or having an argument with my partner?
Totally. So I think it's important to remember that, applying Spinoza's philosophy, it's not about achieving some, perfect Spinozistic state. It's a journey. It's about it's about growth and self-discovery. It's like gradually shifting your perspective
Right.
and developing new habits of mind.
So, like any kind of personal growth, it takes time and effort
Exactly.
and experimenting to see what works for you.
Yeah, and like with any skill, you got to start with small steps. Don't try to overhaul your whole life overnight,
Right.
Just focus on incorporating 1 or 2 new practices. See how they feel.
Okay, so what are some things our listeners can actually do to start bringing, Spinoza into their everyday lives?
Well, I think one of the most powerful things Spinoza gives us is this idea of self-reflection.
Okay.
He wants us to examine our thoughts, our feelings, what motivates us, to really understand why we do the things we do.
So it's like hitting pause on autopilot and actually taking a look
Exactly.
at what's going on in our head.
Yeah, instead of just reacting to things instinctively, you step back
Okay.
and you just observe what's happening inside.
Got it.
And this doesn't have to be some big, complicated thing either. It can be as simple as, journaling for a few minutes,
Right.
or meditating,
Right.
or just, sitting quietly and paying attention to your thoughts and feelings.
You make it sound so easy,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's probably harder than it sounds.
Oh, it definitely takes practice. Our minds love to just race from one thing to the next.
Right.
But the more we practice this, self-reflection thing, the more we become aware of like the patterns that shape our experience.
And that awareness is what gives us the power to, to actually make choices.
Exactly. Choices that are more in line with like our true nature.
And
Lead to more, joy and fulfillment and all that.
Exactly. And speaking of emotions, remember how we talked about how powerful they can be?
Yeah.
Spinoza has another really practical tool for dealing with those too.
So we're not trying to suppress them.
No, not at all. It's more about, it's about recognizing them for what they are.
Okay.
Temporary states that don't actually define us.
got it.
It's about understanding how they influence us and learning to work with them skillfully.
So how do we do that? How do we become less, reactive to our emotions?
Well, one technique is to just observe them as they come up.
Okay.
Notice the sensations in your body, the thoughts that come up, urges to act. Don't try to fight them or push them away. Just observe them, curiously.
Almost like we're watching a movie, detached from it all. Exactly.
The more you practice that, the less power those emotions will have over you. You create space between feeling it and reacting.
Yeah.
And then you can respond to stuff in a more, a wiser way.
I like that. So self-reflection, understanding our emotions, what else?
Well, Spinoza was also really big on finding joy in the present moment.
Yeah.
He thought true happiness wasn't something you chase in the future.
Right.
It was something you cultivated right here, right now.
Like mindfulness.
Yeah, pretty much. He knew we get so caught up in, regretting the past, worrying about the future. And he saw how bringing our attention to the present moment
Yeah.
could bring a sense of peace and contentment.
So appreciating simple things, finding moments of beauty,
Yeah.
connecting with people.
Exactly. Savoring that cup of coffee, taking a walk, talking to a loved one. About training our minds to focus on what's good and true right now.
I can definitely relate to that. When I make an effort to focus on the present, I really feel a shift. It's like all that mental clutter kind of fades away.
That's it. And remember, it's not about being perfectly blissful all the time.
Yeah.
It's about, noticing and appreciating the good things, even when things are tough.
So we've got self-reflection, managing our emotions, finding joy in the moment, and of course, cultivating our reason and understanding, like we talked about.
It's all connected.
It's a lot.
It is, but it's a journey worth taking. Spinoza believed that by aligning ourselves with our true nature and, with the whole universe, we unlock a deeper kind of freedom and lasting joy.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Spinoza. It's been quite a workout for the brain. But this is just the beginning, right? There's always more to learn.
Always.
Yeah.
And if this has sparked your curiosity at all, I definitely recommend checking out Spinoza's writings for yourself.
Yeah, see what speaks to you. Yeah. And remember, putting these ideas into practice, it's a journey, not a destination. Be patient, experiment, and see what helps you live a life that feels, more aligned, more joyful, more free. Maybe start by taking a few minutes each day to just reflect. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
Follow the infinite within with Cecilia to explore profound insights on pantheism. Embrace the oneness of existence and unlock the mysteries within you.